Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are going to cover a topic today. Let me get over to my doc here. We'll be talking about no-code development solutions and making workflows work for you. So hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Davis. I am a product evangelist at Pipefy, which is a no-code workflow automation software solution. And what the product evangelist means is that I sort of live in the marketing world, but work cross-functionally across our sales and product teams, sort of bringing solutions from the larger market back to our own market, and then bringing them out to our customers. What brought me to Pipefy is that I've worked in work management, project portfolio management, and workflow automation software as a solution or SaaS solutions for a long time. And I'm really excited about this market today because it's sort of untapped in a way. And there's a lot of opportunity within organizations to really bring some value in terms of getting rid of lots of manual tasks that make jobs less fun and allow people to really free themselves up to do more interesting and more strategic things in their day-to-day work. And we really are trying to bring that to all business operations and IT organizations that we come into contact with. And we're really excited about that opportunity. And really, if you think about the concept of digital transformation, it started with sort of your really entrenched systems that you have in place today, your ERPs and your CRMs and things like that. But it's an opportunity now to kind of bring that into any and all application and activity within the organization. So that's really where we are. And we're trying to bring that digital kind of transformation and digital opportunity out to really all parts of the business. I am joined today by Philip, aka Phil Lakin, who is a wonderful guest that we're excited to have. He's an early adopter of no-code solutions and has been a strong advocate of no-code for a number of years. And Phil, if you'd like to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Yep, my name is Phil, the co-founder and CEO of No Code Ops, which is the first community newsletter in the space dedicated specifically to folks who work in no code, but are on the operational side. So we'd started the community and newsletter really because we saw no code as a booming space that we were super interested in. Me and my co-founder, and but a lot of the content and community stuff seemed to be geared towards people using no code to build MVPs and early stage products. And we really cared about operational efficiency and like using this stuff internally, and knew that there was people in marketing operations and customer success operations and sales operations, and no one was really talking to each other about all the cool stuff they were doing. And so we built that, and then we also very exciting, have our first software product coming out in let's call it like late December, which we're very excited about, which is the first incident response management tool in the no-code space. So very exciting. That's me. Happy to go into my background, kind of what got me into space, but yeah, wherever you want to take the conversation.
Okay, for sure. So late December is an interesting time for launching a product. Just going to throw that out there, having been in software for so many years.
Yeah.
Good luck.
We want to go against the grain. Well, it's more so we're going into private beta with like folks that have already signed up for it.
Got it.
It's just like starting to get into the hands of folks. But yeah, like the actual launch will be in Q1.
Great. Well, we wish you the very best with that. So before we jump into kind of our questioning, our line of questions, I think I was thinking that it might be worth mentioning the differences between no code and low code, which are often used interchangeably, even for us here at Pipefy. Would you mind explaining kind of your take on the difference for us?
For sure. So big difference obviously between no code and low code. No code, you can completely get value out of it by not knowing code. So everything's visually designed. There still might be a learning curve with the tool itself. And the way I break no code into platforms and tools, like into sectors, are whether it's no code or low code, or like, so you have the integrators, the app/workflow builders, and then you have like the data management component. And Venn diagrams between all of those. And so those can be done both with no code or low code. With no code, it's all visual design. might still have a learning curve, but you could still learn it even if you're non-technical. Whereas low code, you're able to do a few things that with no code you're not necessarily able to do, where you can actually lift up the hood of the product, potentially look at the code, manipulate it yourself. Sometimes you can export the code and bring it somewhere else, so you can spit out like a React front end or something like that, and even though you designed it and built it in no code, you can actually move the product somewhere else in a coded capacity. Or you can use code snippets to just increase the flexibility of the product. So yeah, that's the biggest difference between no code and low code. One question I do get in that kind of realm a lot is no code only for non-technical people and low code only for somewhat technical people? And the answer is no. The way I see it is, if you're completely non-technical, you can use no code to achieve things, but there's also plenty of developers that use no code and low code tools to what I call just like to accelerate, to just like move faster. So yeah, so you have non-technical folks using it, technical folks using it, and low code just gives you a little bit more flexibility, but obviously knowing a bit of code goes far away in that area.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what we see within our customer implementations is that within the business lines themselves, it tends to be pretty strictly no code, just using the visual product to design their processes and build out the processes, and using the drag and drop options for creating kind of the routing transitions and sort of the decision statements or decision processes and things like that. And then even using like an iPaaS like Workato, like we use for doing integrations, which sort of has a no code interface, there does tend to be a little bit more potential for scripting and things like that when you get into more of those technical activities. So that's kind of how like Pipefy itself is more pure no code, but some of the capabilities that we'll bring on the integration side and potentially on the data management side will tend more towards the low code side.
Which is awesome. Whenever you have like a layer of abstraction, right, you're going to restrict things to some level, and that's just the price you pay for visual design, right? Someone's got to be making those decisions at some point to make no code even possible, because obviously it's all coded, right? Right. And so, so at the end of the day,
someone coded it somewhere.
There's code somewhere in it.
Right.
It's not, but yeah, so that's super good thing to point out. Like, low code in terms of flexibility of integrations is super important, because there may just not be. So for instance, like, when I was at Compass, there was not like our main onboarding system for agents was built on a no code platform called Mborder, but they were able to take and spit out webhooks. And like that for us was huge, because like any platform we could integrate with, because they didn't have like a direct native connection, or there was no Zapier connection, for example, right? We were able to just, use webhooks for it. So that's like another version of low code. So yeah. Exactly.
Perfect. All right, great. Well, let's go ahead and get into our no code discussion then. So thinking about no code development, it's getting a lot of attention from small to medium businesses and all the way up through enterprise, really. So you're sort of seeing it everywhere. How would you describe no code development, and why would you say it's becoming part of business's strategy today? What's driving that?
Yeah. So look, typically at a business, when the operations teams needed software to achieve a job, right? Whether that's, looking at all the data that they have about a certain customer, so let's call it like a customer 360 view, or they wanted to build their own workflow that had a lot of changing and updating to it because of just like the way that customer interactions change over time. In the past, you really only had two solutions, which was try to find some off-the-shelf thing that did most of the jobs somewhat well, right? But you're pretty locked into it doing that work, or and that that's like off-the-shelf SaaS, or secretly beg your developers internally to do it for you. And if you're lucky enough to get on like the sacred roadmap, right? Good luck going past a V1. So yeah, good luck getting any updates. So if you needed something custom, you're kind of screwed. And that, this world of no code and low code, it gave a third option that was in the middle, right? Which is like, I could be non-technical And I actually would argue that I think the non-technical folks on the ground are actually the best at solving these types of problems with the right tools in their hands, because they're just so close to the customer experience. Like the devs are never going to be that close to like the internal employee experience around a workflow or the customer experience, like a very specific area. You know, they're typically focused on the core product, but it's like your CX people that see this stuff every day, your sales ops people that are working with your salespeople that see these things every day. Like they know exactly what they need often. And so when you give them the right tools to build it, they can. And so that's why, like, that's where we're starting to see this proliferation of no code. And look, sometimes it's just slapped on things as like a marketing tool. It's like a trending name, but in a ton of cases, you know, it's super valid. And to give these business folks the opportunity to build beautiful, easy to use tools, both like for internal and external stakeholders and customers, we're finally getting to that place where it's like the tool doesn't exist. That's totally okay. You can build your own tool. And here's the kind of Legos to build it. And I think that we're just going to keep seeing more and more and more of that vendors and, you know, platforms in this space are going to be thinking less about how do we give people exactly what we think they need, and more so how do we give people the exact blocks that we think they need to build their own tools. So
yeah, and that's an interesting point too. And we're going to do a poll in a second to see where no code is in your organizations. But one thing that we talk about a lot at Pipefy is sort of what else drives the need for no code is that there are all of these custom apps out there, right? So there's tons of custom apps. I mean, the typical organization has between like 50 and 100 off the shelf applications that they've purchased. But there are a lot of business processes that are not covered within those applications. So you have a lot of coverage, but you also have a lot that's not covered. And in our world, we call these long tail processes. So it might be things that are around your large applications, like your ERPs and your procurement systems and things. And that's also what's driving in our customer base this need for the no code solutions, because they have a lot of manual processes that just simply take a ton of time and are not value add necessarily to their day to day. And so we see a lot of that as well. All right, I'm going to run a quick poll for our attendees. So now you have to actually pay attention and interact for a second. So I'm going to kick this off. What is the state of no code adoption in your organization? And there are 4 answers. State of no code adoption in your organization. So we've got some folks doing it like crazy. Kind of mixed, Phil.
wow, yeah. What's the response looking like?
Yeah, so the response is looking like, I'm going to give it 5 more seconds and we'll say we're about 70% in the middle, using it a little bit, heard of it, but not really adopted it. And then a couple of folks that are fully on board and some folks who are just learning. So let me go ahead and end the poll and I'll share the results so everyone can see.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Yeah. So good opportunity for some learning here as we continue talking about no code. So yeah, so lots of people here eager to learn.
Great. Yeah.
All right. So we'll keep going here. Thanks so much for your feedback, everyone. So tell us a little bit about how you got started with no code solutions. What drew you to it? So kind of what was your business driver?
Yeah. So in another lifetime before I was in tech, I was actually
wait. There's a life outside of tech. What?
There is. I was in it for a lot of years. So I was an actor, so I did like a lot of TV and film stuff. And so when I was an actor, I did some time waiting tables, like every other actor in New York. But I wanted to try something different, and I loved guerrilla marketing and promotions. And so I got all my unemployed actor buddies together, and we started a guerrilla marketing firm for tech companies. And then that ended up getting acquired by one of our clients, which was Get, an Israeli-based Uber competitor. And when I was there, that was my first time. So we were acqui-hired. I had no clue about the industry, how things worked, right? And funny enough, remember sitting at my desk the first few days being like, what do you do at a job where no one tells you what to do? And then eventually they're like, cool, we want you to tackle, rideshare driver onboarding. And the goal is for you to be able to do it in the field. We don't want them to have to come to the office. And for me, it was like, and they also said, oh, by the way, we have no support from our technical team. And I was like, oh, that's what it means to be in operations. Got it. And so, yeah, I worked to build what at the time was a no-code solution. I didn't even know. In my mind, it was just called figuring stuff out. Like I didn't know that there was a term for it, but I use a thing called Pronto Forms and Google Sheets and Zapier, and I combined a bunch of tools to basically allow a driver to be onboarded from one of our brand reps who would, be in like the JFK or LaGuardia, for those, New York airports, like in the taxi parking lots. So we would go there, and while they were waiting for the next Uber ride or Lyft ride, we would onboard them into our system, and it would take about 20 minutes to do the no-code platform. And that's where we started seeing like how powerful this thing is, because we onboarded over 25,000 drivers for that process. And so,
wow.
yeah, and so it scales. I got super interested in the space. And, for me, that was really powerful because I went from being kind of like on the sales and marketing side to like now being super technically influential within the company and the roadmap, even though I was technically non-technical, right? Like I'd never coded. And then I got poached by Compass to do something similar for the real estate agents across the country. And so we built an onboarding process there with this company, Emborder, where we onboarded folks, and it was like over 15,000 real estate agents we onboarded all with no code. So yeah, that's how I kind of got into the world, and then saw a big opportunity to build specifically for the space. And so I left Compass in May and have been working on no code ops and the SaaS product that we're working on in the background called Switchboard now for a while. So yeah, that's
pretty amazing. That's quite a journey.
Stumbled into it and just fell in love.
So I have a question as a follow-on to that. So you mentioned that you didn't get any technical resources, and you were sort of, probably where many of our operations folks are today. But that being said, did you ever foster a relationship with your technical team or your IT team? And I think it's probably just worth talking about that relationship. So how do operations teams navigate needing and driving the implementation of these no-code solutions, but also recognizing that IT sort of is typically the central owner of applications in an organization?
Yeah. So,
and our buyers struggle with this, by the way. So I'm really eager to hear your response.
I have done this both ways and failed miserably, and then done it somewhat successfully. So when I went down in flames, so when I was at Get, I got a lot of momentum around doing this thing, just kind of it started out kind of rogue, and then it became like, the powerful dominant thing. And then, when I saw the power that this thing could have, I started looking all over the organization and being like, whoa, we have tons of inefficiencies that like no code could solve. And I just went in with super sharp elbows, not knowing about like internal, governance and policy, and like how to not have sharp elbows, and like how to make friends. Like I didn't know. I was very new to the whole world of this stuff, right? And so I was like, we need to fix everything. And like,
wait, you didn't realize how much power IT has because they kind of run the business, right? So
I did not. I became the Lord of Shadow IT, right? And so and so I didn't do it quite well there. The onboarding product always stayed as kind of like a really awesome thing within Get, but yeah, so I learned like, okay, like you need to like get along with people to do this stuff. When it's not your process, when it's other people's processes, you have to become somewhat of like a product manager that works for them, not the other way around.
Right.
And so when I went to Compass, so two areas there. One, we worked with our technical team before we developed something, being like, hey, can we just like make sure that like you don't want to build this, and like get their buy-in through that lens. So that was super important, and they did not.
Right.
And then we negotiated with them. Okay, what endpoints can we get from you? What information can we get from you? What information would you want us to give you back? Because we manage our HRIS, was essentially for agents, was in Salesforce. And so we had to get a lot of information from there and put a lot of information back. I know, very strange. It was fun times. so short of it is that we had to like work really hand in hand with them, like every stage. Like I brought them in at every step of like evaluating solutions, and I learned to like really have a collaborative relationship with them and include them in on the conversation from day one. What I found is that like when you have the whole conversation with just your team or just the non-technical team or just like you and the vendor, and people are coming in late on the conversation, there's like immediate resistance.
Right.
And so I would include people early, pretty early. The other thing I did, so that's how I did it on like the technical side of the world, to cross that kind of divide. However, the weird thing that I didn't think I would have to do, that I did have to do a lot of internal marketing on, was getting buy-in from the actual people who would be using this day to day, who were in my team. Because we had 150 onboarding professionals across the US with Compass that like, what I didn't want to do is just say, hey, I found the best no-code product. Like y'all should just, clearly it's the best thing. Like y'all should just use it. And I've seen similar launches like that internally not work out so well.
Right.
And so what I did was I said, cool, region 1, you have something you're kind of using in this world. You test that, you just keep doing that and report back the results after 30 days of using it. Region 2, you're kind of doing something, but like, let's put some more juice behind that and like some more support, and like, you just do that for 30 days. And then a new region that didn't have like anything and they were all choosing spreadsheets, you use this new thing that we found. And after 30 days, we did like a Techstars style like demo day internally, and actually let the entire department vote on their choice. And it was the best EMPS score we ever received as a department. Because people felt so bought in and listened to about the tool that they were going to be using every single day. So so not overlooking the relationship with the technical folks, but also not overlooking the relationship with the people that are eventually going to be using this thing every day are so important.
Yeah, no, of course, like any implementation, adoption is key. So it sounds like a really good strategy to get there. One other follow-on question with the IT side, what other tools have you heard people ask you about that IT owns or manages today that they try to roll out instead of a no-code solution? And have you seen any success or failure there? Because that's one of the stopgaps that happens all the time too, is, hey, we already have ServiceNow, we already have Jira. Why do you need something else for sort of these like operations request processes? And, clearly there's an answer I would like to give, but I'd love to get your take as well.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. There are several systems that they traditionally own, but the more that no code and the power of no code becomes like a force for good internally, and like the more that people are learning, like, wait, I can do what with Zapier?
Right.
Or I can do what with Pipefire? I can do like all my own, like I can build it and like I can change it. What happens is that IT is never going to be as close to your end customer. So for sales ops, the salespeople, for customer ops, like the customer success folks, they're never going to be as close as you are as the operations professional. That's not their job to do, right? So what we're going to see more of a shift over time, hopefully, is that IT is enabling citizen development and citizen automation, and not saying, hey, we have to be the bottleneck for everything.
Right.
You have to come through us for everything. Because our IT team, at Compass, even like our IT team, like they didn't want to like make every Zendesk rule. They didn't want to, guardrail everything. They didn't want to build every Zap and then maintain it for us. But they did want to make sure that if we did it, we were doing it the right way. We were using the right information and the right data, and that it had ownership and some accountability around it. There's all these things the coded world, the no code world is still working on, like doesn't quite have yet. Like we don't have our own CI/CD pipeline yet, really. We don't have like a ton of observability stuff. So like, we're still getting there as a market and as an industry. But just like really directly answer your question, it's about working with and not against the IT team, being like, just saying like, hey, like you always try to go to them first and you just overload them with requests. And be like, do you guys really want to be doing this? How about we find something that gives you oversight to what we're doing, and some veto power, but like day to day, we'll update it. Because like we had Salesforce admins at Compass that in the onboarding step of the agent in like that Chevron stage, right? We had like 100 steps. they didn't need all those records in Salesforce junking up our system, and it changed constantly. So, we wanted to own that. And so having some kind of strategy that says, hey, you have oversight and like we'll participate and give you back data how you want it, if you want it, but like you don't have to manage it, but you still get the rights to observe it and like, shut things down, right? Like that's the, I think, best relationship between the two.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to kind of say this back because it's so critical. So sort of like knowledge and proximity and ownership of the process, right, gives these operations people just a better place to be in terms of defining it, managing it, providing a better service for their customers, internal or external, and really, and kind of optimizing those processes in the best way. You didn't mention speed, which I am going to mention because IT is notoriously known for having a massive backlog right now and not enough people. And to go build that in a ServiceNow or something else, right? Like it just would take too long. And then to your point, you're only going to get Rev 1 because then they have to move on to the other 65 things that are already
go.
right. If they can get there. And then just unnecessary, and then managing this within a simpler platform, right, that can have ownership by the right people allows you to put all the appropriate business rules without adding too much complexity and clutter in sort of your larger business applications, business critical.
And that speed impacts every stage and both internal and external things, right? Like just perfect example, the switchboard, like this like observation thing that we're building right now, right? Our front end is on Bubble, like Bubble.io, which is like a no-code builder. And the speed, like even this morning, I was like working with my co-founder and just being like, hey, our incident response names, like we should include like this other parameter. And like 1 second later, it's there. Like, that's so powerful. Like, like we didn't have to mess with React. We didn't have to mess with the code base. Like it was just like, boom, okay, done, next.
It's done.
That's amazing.
No, speed for sure, right?
And I remember like, it's a funny story on like the no code speed front. We were, so this onboarding tool that we used at Compass, I was with our CRO. He's an amazing guy. He was the CRO of Eventbrite before he was CRO of Compass. And he ran the sales org. And they primarily were relying on Salesforce and Salesforce admins, where we were relying completely, the operations team, on like the onboarding software. And we told them, we're like, hey, look, check this out. Like in onboarding, if someone marks like a 2 or, how's your onboarding so far, 1 through 5? If they say 4 or 5, like, on day 30, we'll send them like ask for referrals to other agents. But if it's, 1, 2, or 3, we don't ask. He's like, wow, that's amazing. Let me ask you this though. I think even if they say 3 and it's like a neutral experience, I think we can improve upon that. Could you like let somebody know about that on my team? Oh, and also just still send them the thing at 30 days. I said, are you sure? He goes, yeah. Open up my computer right in front of him. 20 seconds later, I said, great, that request is now live in production in the system. It's like, are you? He like couldn't understand. He's like, what do you mean it's live? I'm like, nationally, that policy is now live. He's like, what?
You're like, I just added a rule. It's done.
It's like mind blowing. And I think it's a good thing for no code people with like the no code operations brain to keep in mind is like, this stuff might seem like obvious to us as like, we're like, spending all of our days on like product hunt and in these tools, like learning about stuff. But there's people in the business side who are just like mind blown by something. It's pure magic to them still. And so, I'm
just going to add, as a former consultant, that you do need to use the communication adoption vehicles of best practices to communicate out any of these process changes that you make. But it is nice that they can happen so fast. You have to have that balance.
Just because you can be the Wild West doesn't mean you should be. But the CRO tells you something, hey, you're going to do it.
Exactly. So we have a question that is kind of relevant to the IT conversation we were having, talking about leveraging complementary capabilities of other systems. So process mining, RPA, low code, and machine learning. And just wondering kind of what your thoughts are of the no code intersection with those.
Yeah, so I'm seeing like more and more like no code in the business orchestration world and like just RPA world. One of my favorite examples of that is like a platform called Tonkin. Like they're really phenomenal, just like multiple app business orchestration, all drag and drop design. So I'm definitely seeing that impact the world a lot. I'm also seeing a lot of not only can the robot or can like the process monitor and like do a bunch of automations, but specifically, where do you put a human in the loop of something to make a decision? And I'm seeing that totally impact the no-code world too. So for instance, like, whether it's Pipefire, another workflow engine, you see that, okay, we can do a lot of automations. We can bring like an iPass in, or we can like bring a BPM in to like make certain decisions. And but at what point do we want to surface this to a human to make a decision about a thing that then impacts the system, and it's recorded as like a structured field? That should not be overlooked, because that just makes processes that much more flexible, powerful, adoptable. So not everything can be a Zap, right? Not everything can be a, and so having those stages that can be defined by people and, decision points, I think is awesome. So yeah, I'm seeing tons of like human in the loop workflows being built in. I'm seeing more and more complex RPA and just like VPM stuff, like working not only in one application. I think we're kind of past the world that you do every single thing in one application. I think different teams move so fast and don't wait for other teams at larger companies that like, I think we're way past that world. I think it's all about best in breed and systems playing nicely together. And so the systems that can play nicely and like move data back and forth between them with still some observability, like that, the best of breed point solutions is for sure the future. And with that, RPA, I think, will always have a place. I think it changes a bit in the no-code world versus the coded world.
Sure. And I would echo that and say what we see with customers who have mostly what I see as OCR, so sort of like data scraping and as well as RPA, is those are more for specific activities. So like getting data out of documents that you then populate into fields that then route a process, or a repeated task like invoice data entry into an ERP. But then what you get with a no-code workflow automation solution like Pipefy is just that layer on top that sort of continues to drive that process from beginning to end. So, invoice processing, which is part of sort of your accounts payable, accounts receivable, or procurement process, et cetera, that, to your point, is that the no-code solution can be that layer that sort of orchestrates the process from beginning to end and touches multiple applications along the way, potentially picks up data along the way from some of these other automated types of technologies.
Can pick up data, can put data in new places.
Exactly.
Because you got to remember, like, even at Compass, right, where like we had our own solution for the onboarding phase of like the stage of a real estate agent that was mainly managed in Salesforce. We would still give information back to them at certain points that they wanted.
Absolutely.
And so we can gather information at certain stages. We can put out information at certain stages. So yeah, big fan of all of that.
And that also is part of that kind of human centric process, right? Where you do have people that are participating in a process at certain points, but then you have the automated portions of that. So hopefully that answered the question, and we'll keep looking for questions. So thanks for asking, and keep them coming. This is actually potentially related to this sort of people involved. Another issue or misconception we hear is that no-code development relies heavily on the person that set it up. So those that leave an organization might walk out knowing all the secret passageways, so to speak. What can you share to address some of these concerns?
Problem, just like, someone who builds something in code and they haven't documented everything is a problem. So I think there's two answers to the problem. One, it's first of all, it's a culture issue, right? Like, which is like, there's got to be a culture of documentation, work, group thinking through things. Like, you want to balance speed with sustainability in no code. And just because you were able to achieve something and build it and execute it and make it work doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most, that it's going to be the most sustainable product. So things like documenting processes, getting subcommittees of like folks involved across the org who are like adopters and users of this thing. Even at Compass, like we built, like how different products have like a feature upvoting board. We had an internal feature upvoting board for our no-code platform that like people could vote on and like interact with. And so there was that, but that level of discipline is still needed. And I think it just goes to just because you can move fast doesn't mean that you always necessarily should. Sometimes it's good to slow down a bit, make sure you're building the right thing, and that the right people know about it. And should someone, I don't know, leave or God forbid get hit by a bus, right, is like the famous like thing to say there, that other people could pick it up. It's funny too, because it's like part of, not self-plug, but it's a large reason why like we're building what we're building at Switchboard that like we're super excited about, because that documentation, especially cross tool, is definitely is missing to a certain degree, and we hope to fill that gap. But it's never going to be completely technological. There's some degree of it which is always culture based, and so getting documentation done, doing things in sprints. There's things that we got to copy from the world of developers that they've proven have worked. So for instance, like developers don't just like put things into production. Like there's levels of, stages they go through, and then there's testing. And so we might not need to get that complicated, but like, anytime there's a release, you should communicate it. Anytime there's anytime, your process impacts multiple folks, like having conversations with them. And then I always try to get other folks to co-build some stuff with me, so I'm not the only one thinking through a problem. So yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think there's process knowledge, right? And then there's the way it's configured or set up in the solution. Typically, one of the benefits of no code is that it tends to be more visual, so you can see it. So reading an HTML file or a COBOL file or whatever versus C++, I'm dating myself with COBOL, but reading that is literally learning a new language, but having the visualization of a no code, workflow or diagram, et cetera, it is going to be a little bit easier, right?
Right. And you can see what's going on and what it's doing, but what you miss often, and I don't know if PyPy has a solution like internally for some platforms do, some platforms don't, but like what you don't capture is intention. Why was this done? What was the purpose? Was this a short-term or long-term fix? Who is the owner of it? What is the succession path once that owner leaves the organization or even just leaves that team? Like that stuff is so important, that, that tribal knowledge and like systemically capturing that is so, that's why there's whole products. Like my wife works at Guru, like the knowledge management company. Like there's whole
we use
fields. Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Big fan. They, there's a whole field around knowledge management, capture, updating, right? So, bringing that into the world of no code, make it just, it gives you the best of both worlds, right? You get the speed, but you also get the sustainability of it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be nerd out for a second, but like dynamic routing, right? So you actually are dynamically selecting the person that something gets routed to based on criteria. That's a level of automation that is relevant, and that most workflow automation solutions do. I know Pipefy does, but that's just one example, right? So you're not hard coding a person, but you're actually routing based on criteria. So,
and that criteria can change, and the people that you're routing it to can change. And so knowing how to get in there and do that's a good thing for more than one person to know how to do.
Yep. I think we covered this one already, just talking about how IT and the business can live together in harmony. You think we're comfortable with that one? I think we sort of talked about IT, or I guess just any other tips you could add on getting IT's buy-in and support for no code development.
So I like to say, like, include people early, but make their roles easy to digest. You don't want to come to folks with like a blank slate. Like when I would go to IT, I'd say, hey, look, here's the problem we have. Here's, what we're thinking about solving it. By the way, do we have anything internally that I don't know about that like could actually solve this? Because that's always a great question to ask them, because they might know something that, oh yeah, we actually have 80 licenses for this thing that we're not using that like actually does a decent amount. And if we are looking to buy and not build or repurpose something else, hey, by the way, I've already found like 3 folks in this space, and you're like, here's like the, always makes you look smart when you pull up like a G2 comparison page, but like here's just like the general direction I was thinking. I haven't started any conversations with these vendors. This is all my own research, right? And then just get their input. And so I'm not like leaving it wide open for them, and I'm allowing them to participate as much as they want to participate, but they're a part of the conversation from day one.
Perfect. We have a poll. We're going to ask people to weigh in on what they consider the biggest challenge to no-code solutions. So if we have any IT people in the audience, they might add this. But what we're going to kind of move into now is some of the potential, I don't want to say pitfalls, that might be too strong a word, but real challenges that you've run into with no-code. And I think we've covered some of them already, but also just sort of like, it's not all sunshine and roses, right? So let's go ahead and get to the next one. All right, so I'm launching the poll. What do you consider the biggest challenge to no-code solutions? Education, change management, buy-in, or tools? Not knowing where to start. So go ahead and respond, folks. So people are starting to weigh in. Education and change management are winning so far. We're going to go for another 10 seconds. Education, people not understanding what it is. That's interesting. And then buy-in. So that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And perfect. Thanks, everybody. So looks like we just got one more question in, so we'll share. So we can see education, change management, buy-in are tied, and then tools, kind of not knowing where to start.
Got it.
And so, so let me stop sharing that. Sorry. And so just thinking about kind of, from your experience and those that you've worked in, can you just share some of the challenges you might have faced? Not everything can be, or maybe talk about like, you talked a little bit about this as some of the human interaction, but what might be some areas that are better reserved not to be automated or reserved for the pros, so to speak, for lack of a better term?
Well, I think no coders are engineers, right? Like just on a different level. So, however, I'll give you one area that is like a really tricky area is setting up what ends up being separate sources of truth for data. Not good.
Right.
So I try to make sure that whoever owns that core system, that like we're playing nicely with them. And if we are storing data, it's not like our own version of like everything they have. Like we're keeping them in sync somehow. And that's why I love reverse ETL tools, because like they're gonna really like the Syncarius, Polytomics, like all of them of the world, because they're gonna be able to keep all these tools in sync in a way that the tools themselves are like not really great at, I think. But yeah, like trying to maintain a single source of truth is so important.
That's why integrations are so important, right? I mean, that's why integrations are so critical.
So important. And not just if this, then that, like event-based automation, like true syncing.
Oh no, yeah.
It's so important because you just don't want to have your own database that when the database already exists somewhere. And so, God, that's like the biggest one. And then the only other thing to keep in mind is like security, compliance, all the fun stuff, right? All of a sudden you have access to all this data, or just because you can bring it into a certain environment doesn't mean that you should. And so being mindful of that, what are the security parameters, or what is like, the level of compliance that a certain platform has versus another. So just because I could pull the CSV and upload it completely into this platform, should I, or is that okay to do? And then thinking about, and by the way, permissioning rights and governance, like all the fun stuff. You got to think about it, because if you don't, all of a sudden you've, and this happens a lot in the world of no code. So one of the fun sunshine and roses area is all of a sudden by trying to solve one problem, you've created three more.
And that's why partnering with IT can be so critical, right? Because this is something they know. They've done it.
They know it's in their blood, governance, roles, rights, permissioning, like this stuff's in their blood. Like they get this stuff.
Right.
And so just being like, hey, I know what we need to do here, but like, I want to work with you to figure this out is so important.
And if you're going to do a larger roll out, single sign-on is just going to be your friend, right? Everyone's going to appreciate it anyway. So you might as well actually go there.
Yeah. And like put provisioning and deprovisioning plans. So, because remember, when you own a SaaS tool and you don't hook up to SSO, you're manually provisioning people.
Exactly.
Really don't want to
do. And then they're forgetting their password, and then guess who's resetting their password for them? Yes.
Guess who just created their own support desk system.
Exactly. All right, great. Well, we're going to move into our last topic, which is something I know near and dear to your heart, but sort of, do you have a model that is tried and true for getting up and running with no code development? And I'm pretty sure there's a multi-step process that you recommend.
Yeah. So let's say you're in operations, some problems across the company that could be, that potentially solved, but you haven't really ventured into that spot. And your devs and or IT in your company really own all the technical processes. So my approach is finding something that would be impactful, an area that's very impactful, would move the needle for like your customers and or your internal team. Something that your manager cares about in terms of their goals, or whoever you report to. And the third thing, I think people leave this part out a lot, and they shouldn't, something that you're passionate about personally, whether like building something for it or learning more about it or elevating your skills in it. Because you almost become like an entrepreneur, right? Which, so you should be somewhat passionate about it. And you kind of get to choose your own journey, because what you're going to do is you're going to take all those three areas, find what's in the middle, and, get some buy-in from your manager and say, look, I want to spend 10% of my time just investigating a solution here. Now, if something your manager cares about and is going to have impact and you're passionate about, any good manager should say, well, if it's only 10% of your time, sure, why not? And you'll see that eventually that can sometimes very fast turn into its own full-time gig. And now you're vitally important to the company. And
sure.
So that's always the place I tell folks, especially like in our no code ops community and all that stuff. And people approach me one-on-one. I always tell them like finding the intersection of those three is always where you want to start.
Absolutely. And then we didn't talk about kind of the label of citizen developer. We've more spoken about no code, but is that truly when someone becomes a citizen developer? Is that passion kind of driving that potentially?
Yeah. So technically, if you're developing stuff with no code, you're a citizen developer. Now, whether your company has a citizen developer program or not, like whether there's structure around, giving people the right tools, finding the right tools for them, and then also governing how that program works, what they're building for, what areas of business they're solving for. And those are two separate things. So not every company has a citizen developer program, but they do technically have citizen developers. So it's kind of like they're kind of one and the same.
Got it. Okay, perfect. All right, great. Well, I'm going to open it. We have a few questions here. So thank you. And let's see, I'm going to just open up the Q&A. There's one question that it's a quote from somewhere, so you might have more context than I do. Members of our community are automating workflows at Hyatt Regency. Is that something that you're familiar with?
Yeah, so we have in our no code ops community, we have folks in between the community and the folks who read the newsletter are super active. Folks at tons of large companies. So I just name a few like Hyatt, Coinbase. I'm sure there's like tons on that site that I'm thinking of. I mean, we have folks like from Wix, Google, you name it. Allstate, CVS Health. AngelList, like folks that are in operational roles at some of these startups or more legacy or even Fortune 500 companies, folks from Disney, who are just so interested in this stuff and the power behind it. So yeah, we have folks from tons of large companies and medium-sized companies and startups coming and learning more about no code through the community and the newsletter. And for those of you wondering, the newsletter is free. It's just you sign up at nocodeops.com. And then to apply to the community, there's a community application button. That's like where we host our own events, and we have like our own private Slack channel and all that stuff.
Perfect. Do you know specifically what they're doing at Hyatt Regency? Like what department maybe, or?
You know, it's
Are you
so
allowed to talk about it? I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it.
I can't talk about it like completely, but I will say someone that we know there is building some cool ass meeting tool that in terms of just like how meetings work are run, recorded, tracked. Like it is, and he's using like some really cool technology for it. Like I can't talk about more than that, but like this dude just was like tired of meetings not being run in the way that he wanted to, and like literally just built his own tool with no code to solve for the problem. I was like so impressed. Yeah.
Love that. Go get it. All right. Our next question. What do you think is the single most important feature for a no code application regarding interface with existing business systems, database, REST, OAuth, ...
Yeah. So
what is OAuth, by the way?
It's a way to access a tool. So like if you've ever like logged in with Google or just ways to access and authenticate yourself into the products. So here's the thing. Knowing what the capabilities are when scoping this stuff out and like what technologies you already have and what their requirements are super important. So what you don't want to do in the world of no code is not understand those business requirements. Go learn about vendors and tools, get your team excited for those tools, and then find out there's no way your company will ever let you use them because they don't play well with your legacy tools. So finding out those requirements really early on and then limiting the scope of who you're talking to based on that, super important. In terms of database, like I said earlier, you want to make sure that you're not replicating multiple sources of truth, that you're sticking with hopefully one source of truth. Maybe your system separately has like some more context in that source of truth. I personally hope, like if I were to, wave my magic wand over the future of this stuff internally, I think that data will be less guarded by teams like BI and IT, and we'll move more to this like data mesh architecture, which is like what I would love to see in the industry, which is where basically there's rules that everybody plays by, but everyone owns their own sets of data and how they relate to each other. So for instance, like if I work in customer success and I want to pull some stuff from sales, there's like a data catalog that they own and maintain that, I can go and pull data out and like make a whole new data set, but like we all play by the same rules. And like we all know there's one source of truth, but like, we're able to play nicely together. Hopefully that's like a paradigm
Citizen
shift.
BI.
Oh man, I'm so excited for it. Well, the tools now like ThoughtSpot, there's like another one that I was just looking at, now that the fact that you can like type a sentence to get a chart, like is
right.
Wow. So I want to see more of that stuff. So
yeah, no, I agree. Awesome. Yeah, no, I would agree. So that's good. So that's all our questions that we have live. But so I guess we'll leave everyone with this. If there's one piece of advice you would want to leave everyone with, what would it be? Oh, wait.
Do we have another question that just came in?
We do actually. Yeah. So you can
answer that before
you have more time. You have more time on the advice.
All
right. It says no code approach uses black box type modeling. Do you provide documentation for what is inside the black box so users can debug problems in case they arise?
Great question. So there's multiple levels of no code tools. Some you can't see the modeling at all. Some you can actually see it, and then some you can actually model it yourself.
Right.
So yeah, so that's pretty phenomenal. And so, yeah, where it's not modeled, if that's like important, then, you should look at ones where you can either at least, get a glimpse of it, export it, sync it, or build out the model yourself. I just think of like, just giving like a random example of one off the top of my head, but I think like it's either Y42 or Y24. Like that's a great example. Like, Dataland, like a new tool. It's kind of like Airtable. If Airtable is like really built for developers, like really want to be a database, but still like a visual interface. Like there's something where you can build your own data. Xano is like a no-code backend where you build your own data model. So, so it doesn't have to be a black box. Sometimes it is because you don't have access to it, but other platforms you actually do have access. Like I said, other platforms you can control it. So it
sounds like you're saying if it is a black box model and you need something that's not a black box model, you should probably find a different one, a different option.
Find one that you it's a little bit less of a black box if you need it. In
Right.
terms of debugging, it's actually on the switchboard side that we're super interested in. Like, so for instance, when something goes wrong, how do you even find out, and how do you fix it, and what's your escalation paths, and like, so we're thinking through that stuff from like a escalation incident response side. But yeah, some tools are harder to debug than others. It's just the rule of like, what is it, like leaky abstraction, where it's like the further you get away from the raw code, the easier you make something, the decisions you're making to hide certain things from folks. Whether you make the hood lift upable or not, that's kind of up to the product.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to give my piece of advice to give you more time for yours. So my piece of advice is find something that's really, really, really painful that you can have a huge positive impact on your organization by automating with a no-code solution, and do it. And don't think about not doing it, because it's inexpensive, it's fast, it's easy. You can work with IT, you can overcome any challenges there, and it would be totally worth it on the other side. That's my advice.
I think mine would be, don't assume that you can't have a huge outsized impact on your organization because you're non-technical, and that you can actually use that to your advantage. Like the fact that I'm still don't write code and I'm still non-technical, I can see things that like developers can't see when it comes to usability. So like,
right.
I don't know.
And process automation and process opportunity.
Right. You can totally use it to your advantage, and it can be, your impact can be so outsized and massive. Like we did the ROI calculations, like how much money we were saving. It was like millions of dollars we were saving by like not building this, in-house. So I just like, don't be shy about that front. Like you really can aim for the moon and hit it. So yeah. No,
I would agree. And I'm going to do a shameless plug, since Pipefy is hosting this webinar. I'm just going to launch one more poll asking folks if they're interested in seeing a demonstration of our no-code solution in action. No pressure for folks to answer, but in the time that we have left, I just want to say, Phil, it's been a true pleasure and a lot of fun, and we really appreciate it. Yeah, it's been great, and hopefully, it seems like people were engaged with our conversation, so that's good, and had great questions. And I really appreciated being able to really discuss and unpack kind of some of the challenges folks will face on their no-code journey, and how to best partner both with their technical team and the IT organization, as well as those adoption things that are going to be considerations. So those are definitely things to pay attention to. I think with that, we are out of time, and I really, really, again, appreciate everyone's time. And Phil, we couldn't thank you more.
Oh yeah, great to be here. And anyone, best way to reach me if you ever want to have a one-on-one conversation about any of this stuff. If you're interested in the no-code ops community, if you're using Zapier or Integromat internally and like want to learn more about the incident response management platform we're building, best way is just Philip with one L at Propulsion, or I choose no-code ops at nocodeops.com or on Twitter.
And then you said the newsletter sign up is nocodeops.com.
Nocodeops.com, free to sign up for the newsletter. Yep.
Perfect.
We ship it out about once every week to 2 weeks.
Awesome. All right. Well, enjoy your library in San Francisco. Thanks, everybody.
I will.